Hey, welcome back to 3D Sorcery. I kind of wanted to start a new series of videos. As you know from before, I've started jumping back into indie games, and I'm really excited about it. But I wanted to do a series of video kind of going through my process of how I create levels for a particular game design. So right now I'm working on an FPS game. It takes place in the underworld. There's a lot of kind of hellish, scary elements in there, which is, I love doing that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm totally all about it. But I wanted to do a series of like, okay, what's like the, and this could be a series of videos, basically like conceptual to greyboxing to kind of modeling to final polish and integration into the engine. So what this series of videos is going to be is essentially like creating a level from start to finish. And, where I come up with the conceptualization, I use like Procreate to just kind of like sketch out my ideas for what I want to do. Then I'll save those images out and bring those into Unity as like a reference. Then I'll use things like uModeler and ProBuilder in Unity to help do the greyboxing. And what's really great about that is it just gives you kind of a place where you can rough out what you're trying to make, right? And I think for this series, I'm just going to start with the front. So right now we're in the level particularly that I'm going to be working on. It's called the Ossuary, and it is a level where you fight a bone reaper in the game. So you're kind of like this assassin in the underworld, and you're seeking out these different reapers that you need to eliminate. And for this particular level, it's the bone reapers level. So his kind of stronghold is called the Ossuary, which is like a giant bone temple. And what I'm gonna do is basically walk you through my conceptualization for that particular level. And we'll just start with kind of like the front area. I think that's a good kind of solid piece to manage. But I really want to show you kind of my process in conceptualizing this area, putting it together, bringing it in as different images, maybe into Unity as like reference, using ProBuilder. I like to use ProBuilder as well as uModeler. I think they both have advantages. They're both really great prototyping tools if you use Unity. And you can use them both at the same time, which is great, and you can convert one to the other. So a lot of times what I'll do is create stuff in uModeler or ProBuilder and then ProBuilderize it and then bring it into ProBuilder, but have them both open at the same time. Totally works fine. I use that. The reason being is uModeler, I feel like, has much better Boolean tools than ProBuilder. ProBuilder tends to break and weird stuff happens, where uModeler's Boolean tools are fantastic. There's also some measuring tools in uModeler which are really nice too. But regardless of that, I use both when I do my kind of greyboxing. But then what I do is I kind of get all the greyboxing done, and then I take it out of Unity and I bring it into Maya as like a reference piece. So it's like you're greyboxing, and then you're exporting all that out into Maya, which is great because then you don't have to work so hard at like getting the sizing right, which is always kind of a pain in Maya when you're going back and forth between Maya and Unity. The grid sizing is always kind of a pain, and then they have these like built-in tools which are supposedly there to help you, but technically they're kind of not helping you because they're using sizes that are different in both. So really what you want to do is get the same size in each but keep it at the default settings in Maya, which is great if you export out an OBJ from Unity from like ProBuilder. You bring that into Maya, it's set as the same size it should be. So you have a 1-to-1 reference ratio, which is great. I'll usually make a little capsule too, as like, that's my player. So with that being said, I'm going to be doing that. We'll go through the process. We'll do this as like 2 or 3 videos, maybe 4, we'll see. And conceptualization, greyboxing, exporting out all of the footage, all of the 3D models, and then bring them into Maya and actually doing some modeling. And on that last video I did that kind of had the demon stuff that was in there, I showed you kind of how I use spheres to just loosely conceptualize and sculpt different elements, and then I re-topo over that. Same kind of process for some of the detail elements that go into a castle. Now remember, this is going to be like a bone castle, so a lot of like bone elements and ribs and skulls and all kinds of fun stuff. So all that'll be in there, but hopefully this will help you out. Just like to kind of show off my process, as well as give you a little sneak preview into what I'm developing in the game. You can see my controller in there and some other stuff. It's super early in development, but it's like start showing it now as I get development. So I guess this would be kind of like the first behind the scenes dev video of the game. So I'm excited about it. Stay tuned, watch the conceptualization video here, and follow along. If you're working on your own projects and you have some ideas, this might be a good reference to kind of go back to, like, how did he do it? What was his process on kind of creating a level and grayboxing all those elements and putting it together? I want to do this to kind of help you as well, not only show you what I'm working on, but also kind of give you some insight as to, like, what's a good pipeline for development, especially for something like Unity. And I think this works fairly well. It's my way of doing it. This is just kind of the way I do it, but I use a lot of different tools to do so. So we'll show you kind of all those as we get through it, and we'll go from there. So enjoy. So as I mentioned, when I get started on these projects, I usually start in Procreate on the iPad. I just really, really like that app to just kind of scribble and get ideas down. And, when I go from kind of conceptual piece to conceptual piece in the design, I'll usually use Procreate just to kind of sketch it out and give myself a really good image to kind of work from. So this is kind of my starting point. Just open it up, sketch something out, and then went ahead and threw it into Unity. So we're inside of Unity, and when I get started, whenever I'm working on any type of level project, I always want to start with a prototyping tool. And in here, I'm using two, actually. I'm using uModeler as well as ProBuilder. And I think both are really great grayboxing tools, but for sure you want to at least use some type of prototyping tool. Now, you could do things in Maya 100% and then bring it over into Unity, but I feel like when you use some of the grayboxing tools that are available in Engine, the benefits you have are immediately after you start kind of working with the prototyping tools, you can hit the play button and jump right in. You can see things at scale. And that's really important when you're developing something that's going to be an impactful, maybe environmental piece or giant piece of a level that you're working on. You want to have that flexibility of being able to quickly iterate and create something that's going to be impactful, but also something that the user can see. You'll notice in here from time to time, I'll actually skip over to the play mode, which has my player controller in there, so I can kind of run around and see everything at scale. Now, I'm using a custom player controller, but you could get your own. There's plenty of ones on the asset store if you're not able to create your own type of player controller. But it's really good to kind of see what you're creating in context and think about kind of down the road how you're going to evolve the concept. Now, this is just simple to start. I'm just using simple shapes, simple geometry, just kind of putting things together to make it seem very, very simple, but I'll eventually be taking this out and putting it in Maya and going crazy with details and all that kind of fun stuff. So based on my initial concept, I had kind of these buttresses that were in the front of the kind of castle that I'm creating here, as well as these kind of large windows that kind of led into this stronghold. So that's kind of where I'm taking my initial approach, building this front door as well as all of these little kind of buttresses and long kind of castle-like windows. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why are you using two prototyping tools? And the only clear reason, and I think I mentioned it before, is essentially the Boolean tools in uModeler are far superior to the ones in ProBuilder. But I like some of the kind of clicky elements that are inside of ProBuilder. It seems easier sometimes to build some shapes. uModeler has a tendency of building a lot of child objects within each other, which is fine, but every time I create a new object in ProBuilder, it gives me a new object. So part of the reason I like using ProBuilder is because of that. So kind of the reason I use two. Eventually I turn it all into ProBuilder and then I just take it out of Unity. And again, you can see here, I keep going back to play mode because I consistently want to look at what I've created and make sure it feels good in the scale. It's not just a matter of like making something cool, and even just grayboxing something. You want to, consistently kind of play it and make sure that it feels good to scale, that it doesn't take too long for the player to kind of go from one end to the other, things of that nature. So that's kind of the reason I keep going back into play mode. As I started to wrap up kind of this front entryway for this stronghold that I'm creating, I figured it was a good time to bring in the actual concept art at this phase to kind of look at, I was kind of eyeballing it off to the side as I was building this, and then I was like, I'd rather bring it into Unity and use it as an actual piece of reference so I can kind of build to scale. There's a lot of elements in this little sketch that I feel like need to make it into this initial design. So a lot of times what I'll do, I honestly just bring the art in to Unity just as like a little texture map, put it in my scene and just move it around and blow it up super huge so I can look at it. Kind of like you do in any 3D modeling program. I'm just in the conceptual phase right now. So this is perfect for just kind of bringing it in and just glancing over at the artwork while I'm building to scale to see like, are all these things kind of matching up? Is this kind of getting to the general scale and size of what I want to make? Eventually this will all be switched out, right? But we're just kind of having a loose conceptual idea of the sizing of everything we're going to be building in this game. So you'll notice in here I'm going to be putting in a lot of very simple geometry, pieces of that nature, just to kind of imply where elements are going to go. This is kind of the first part of a larger phase. So working on the back part of this stronghold, it's really kind of larger objects back here, which I'm just basically going to use very simple primitives and just kind of fill up this whole back area. As a player, you're not really going to be traveling up in that area. It's really just meant for kind of like an impactful moment before we actually get into this castle. And it really like kind of needs to make sense, but not too much. It's more for visual impact. Once you're inside the castle, like into the levels, they're not necessarily even going to follow what you see on the outside. So the way my game's set up is essentially you're going to have to find a way to open this front door. Once you open the door, then it's going to load into when you're in the interior of the castle, and you're really not kind of running up and going back outside. So, with that being said, you want to think about your game structure and how your game is going to be set up. I'm doing this in particular so it loads faster and we don't have to deal with the outside and the interior at the same time. It's more level to level kind of situation. So this is more of like a big kind of visual moment, big visual flair before we get into the inside. And again, this is just represented by really simple geometry. I'm taking very basic pieces and just kind of filling up this back part, which will give me just reference points to then go in and make really cool stuff that I can change out later.
And we'll get into some optimization techniques when we get into some of the later videos of how we can like cut the backsides of them and all that kind of stuff, because we're never going to be going in that area. But it'll be kind of like just a really good reference point while we start working. As you can see, like here, this giant skull in the middle is just like a giant sphere with kind of like a jaw that I connected to it, right? That'll eventually become a really cool skull. So think about those big elements, and you could even use like a cube just to represent what they are, but they're just placeholder for now. We're just making placeholder elements that we're going to change out, make cooler later, but it'll give us kind of a really good reference point or a starting point to work from.
So that's kind of how I start with my prototyping. You know, do those initial sketches, then start building it out in Pro Builder, get your kind of Greybox, like low fidelity version working. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to export it out, bring it into Maya, and then start doing like more detail, refining some of the elements, things like that. But one of the things I do like to do, which you might have noticed, is I have my player controller in there so I can run around, kind of check out the scale of everything that I'm building, make sure it like feels like it's right. And then from there, you know, once you get a general idea kind of in your head of what it's going to look like, then, you know, export it out and start refining those details and bringing it into the actual game engine. So in the following videos, we'll be doing that. Be sure to subscribe. Hopefully you liked this kind of series. I figured it'd be cool to at least show the process of kind of what I do. And also like just give a sneak peek as to what I'm developing. Hopefully these tips and kind of tutorials help you on your own projects moving forward, but look forward to seeing what you guys are working on. If you have any links or have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to add them in the comments below, and keep moving forward and do more videos like this. So anyways, have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching 3D Sorcery. Be sure to subscribe if you like these kind of videos. Thanks.